Response. Thank you, Antoine. Hello, everybody. We are going to show what we did this summer with Losonnante and the Natural History Museum of Paris. I'm going to present what Losonnante is first. It's quite intriguing, quite different. And so we have to begin by understanding the concept. Losonnante are sound terminals that work by bone conduction. So you can hear the sound with your body and not with your ears, as is usually the case, because ultimately the sound vibrations will move through the mani from the elbow, which you place on the device, and traveling via the arm. You will have the sound in your hand, and then you put the hand all over your ear. In fact, your body forms its own headset or earpiece, and that's the main activity of Losonnante, which means that it's an experience for the visitor which is different, innovative, and which is a bodily experience and which carries a lot of emotion. And that's important in the experience we offer. And this will shape the sort of sound content that we try to provide via the system. So that's bone conduction. So close your ears and listen. So we put our hands over our ears, and in that way we create the immersive effect. We cut ourselves off from the surrounding noise. So it's very effective in a room like this, in a trade show or in a noisy site where there can be a lot of visitors, a lot of background noise. And so this is something interesting for the site, which in fact is that we don't need to provide headsets. You don't need to manage headsets, store them, disinfect them. And we don't use mobile phones to download apps or to scan QR codes, which is also interesting to keep it very much an experience, a self-contained experience without going off onto social media. And it's quite fun. People do tend to like it. It's silence. There is no conflict with sound coming from other users, so it can be used at the same time as other sound systems. Or you can just use this and there will be no conflict between the sound for different uses. It can work outside. This has been proven. Audrey will talk about that, and there are no specific accessories.
Merci, Fabien.
Thank you, Fabien, for that presentation. I am Audrey. I'm in charge of cultural and action and events at the Zoo of Paris, which is one of the sites of the Natural History Museum in the Paris region. There are 13 sites in total in France. In 2022, we had about 700,000 visitors, generally families. And in summer, the period when we used these Losonnante terminals, there are also a lot of school groups, which is quite interesting as a factor to take into account when we're talking about the noise there might be. So it's an audience which tends to be families with a lot of children. And installed 4 terminals last summer at the Zoo of Paris. We had a season was being organized on the sensors, and also our own sensors and the sensors of animals. We use these outside with different formats. If you go to the stand, you can see the different formats we used: higher for adults, lower for disabled visitors, and also for children. And these were freely accessible. We didn't provide human guides or mediators to explain how to use them. And for the content, we provided sound recordings and did also some creation work with Losonnante for very specific content. And what did we put in it? How did we use it? There were 2 objectives for us. First of all, to present this bone conduction by experimenting with this with three uses for different species of animal: whales, elephants, and humans. and then 2 other terminals which were more entertaining on listening to sounds from animal species which the visitor will not generally get to hear during their tour. For example, different species that people will not, that make noises but which the visitor cannot see. So also we did provided explanations that people could read while they were listening, and very little personal support. So we thought what we did first was that we identified that the tool enables us to cut ourselves off from the world without using a smartphone app, all the things you explained. But you have to be careful about the sounds that are going to be used. To work with lower sounds, higher sounds will be less suitable. We had the possibility to do trials on our site, and we thought it seems perhaps less suited to the spoken word. It's better to have other forms of sound. And then also there is the user guide, even though they do provide stickers with little images, as we have personnel who are around. It's good to explain to people exactly how to do this for the bone conduction. So we have to see how we guide the users to make good use of the tool. However, apart from this, over the 2 months of the summer using this outside, the terminals proved to be very robust and resistant. There was rain, there were storms. Obviously, you have to have an electricity connection, so really no problem at all in that respect. For outdoor use, really very well designed, and really there is that wow effect for visitors, which is very powerful. And when people discovered the devices, we would say to them, come and listen with your elbows, which obviously is quite intriguing. And then they really thought about that wow effect, because when people settle into position, their first reflex is to stop, just to share their surprise with the people visiting with them, and then to go back to their content. And in the creation of the content and how the soundtrack is used, we prepared for this. We arrived. We have a little latency, a small time of latency at the beginning to allow the user to get used to the system. So lots of little details which have been very well designed. There's also the fact that you can, it's connected to Wi-Fi. So when Fabien and Olivier are not there, we can manage the technical parameters ourselves, like the volume or the latency time at the beginning of the soundtrack, and also the availability of the content. And support is very important and very well managed. So we were hugely satisfied by the use of these terminals. This isn't something that was scheduled to be for the long term. We rented the terminals for 2 months, and we are now thinking about making this more permanent, not for the same purpose, but perhaps to use them in a different way, now that we have seen how this goes down with our visitors, and that we could perhaps do this over the longer term in our visitor tour. And thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup. Donc, pour ce retour there.
For that feedback on that. Are there any questions from the audience? I just wanted to know how you communicated about this in marketing. Are there labels? Is it mentioned on your website? For visitors who've come to the site, it's on the visitor plan with a little pictogram. There were other experiences which were also offered in addition to this. So it was an area on the visitor plans and on signposts in the zoo, and we saw the photograph.
Là, voilà.
There you see we did this banner sort of so that it was visible from quite a distance. And it was also mentioned in our brochures and leaflets with our program and also on our website. But there wasn't specifically communication dedicated to this project, as it was part of a greater whole, and so to enhance the visitor experience. Thank you very much. Are there any another question I could perhaps ask you that might be interesting is how did people use it? Did you get any surprises the way they used it? Not really. Generally, they used it in a way which was very nice, but it really is a tool for sharing between visitors. We saw, obviously, children had difficulty getting used to it, and so parents would put their elbows on the objects and put their hands over the ears of their children. And in fact, that went via the parent to the child. And so, in fact, this was doing it. This wasn't exactly what it was designed for, but it was a very pleasant way of doing it. But otherwise, we didn't see anything. We thought people might use it as picnic tables or things like that, but they didn't in the end.
Yeah. You did.
And a question perhaps on the design. You mentioned the fact that there are the 4 terminals which are adapted to different users. How long did that take? And how long did you work together on this to put together this project? In each project, we know that we have something a bit strange to present, and therefore that needs to be accepted. So what we always propose is to come to the site to explain not only to the person we're in touch with, but also to their colleagues, and to do demonstrations and to propose an approach to give a first insight into it so people can get a practical idea of how to use this with a temporary exhibition. And so there is that relationship that we build with our clients, which is essential because it's not something which we're used to. And that is quite important. It's a physical object which does need trials and tests. And so obviously there are events like this one, like Museum of Connections, where we can show this to people, and also we can present the solutions. And quite quickly we defined what we wanted to put into the terminals in terms of sound, and then for use. And we devised the content because we have a big database of sound recordings of animals and others, so we drew on that. And for the sounds we didn't have, we asked for an intrauterine sound, for example, which had to be created with a few iterations. But we did the first tests in June 2021, and we installed it in June 2022. And so ultimately that was the time it took us to think things through, also for the administrative processes, but it got set up quite quickly. And in terms of feedback and evaluation from users, have you used surveys or questionnaires to find out how it's going down with people, or what they think of the terminals?
Ouais, causer, c'est en accès libre.
Not at all. It was freely accessible. There wasn't necessarily a questionnaire or anything that went with it. So it really was just from us observing when we were outside to watch people using it, to see how people were using it. Having said that, regarding the content that we create, honestly, I find it difficult to it's the experience more than what we actually put in there, I would say, in practical terms. So a quite experiential approach. And in terms of budget, is that something you can disclose? Ideas about the cost? What do you mean? There are different budgets. You have this terminal here, this box, which is set into the furnishings which we build ourselves and then propose to our clients. So for the Zoo of Paris, there were 4 of these boxes, plus the furnishings. That must have been about €9,000, I think, including the sound production. Having said that, you can also buy this. It's not just rentals, and you can just buy it and integrate that into an exhibition design as an opportunity. And if you want to buy it, the box here costs €3,400. Losonnante, you were with us last year at the Innovation DUOS, so you have experience of working on these projects. What other places have you been working with to give us an idea of what can be done with the terminal and with this mediation device? So we work mainly with tourist sites and cultural sites, bearing in mind that it always goes very well with the general public. When it's sites visited by families, that is the ideal situation. So we're very present in the different visitor centres, the Cité de l'Océan, the Ocean Visitor Park in Paris, or the Museum of Alicia, showing the war between the Gauls and the Romans.
Le vaisseau à Strasbourg.
And
Sur the do therefore.
The Science Centre financed by the EU in Strasbourg, and a number of other sites with scenographies that can be quite interesting when the box is inlaid into a tree or another place, for example. Okay, thank you very much. You can be found on K07. K7 stand K7. So come and cover your ears to enjoy the sound. So thank you for your presentation.